record-breaking £39 billion investment into social and affordable housing. And I want to make sure that communities like mine in Stockport are prioritised. So can I ask the Prime Minister to confirm that these homes will be built, they will be affordable, and will he look again at suspending the right to buy?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are delivering the biggest boost to social and affordable housing in a generation, and proud to do so. Our £39 billion investment will deliver around 300,000 sociable and affordable homes, with at least 60% of homes delivered for social rent. Mr. Speaker, whilst we don't intend to remove the right to buy, which helps social tenants get on the property ladder, we're reforming the scheme to protect social housing stock and encourage councils to deliver more new homes.
Sir Julian Smith.
Mr. Speaker, a much better understanding of the particular needs of autistic and neurodiverse children is vital to expand capacity in mainstream education for SEND pupils. Can I urge him, as he looks at this bill over the summer, the SEND bill, to introduce mandatory training for all teachers and all staff on autism and neurodiversity?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank him for that contribution, because parents and children have been failed far too often. We are committing an additional £1 billion into SEND, but there must be meaningful reform alongside it, and new teachers must have the appropriate training. So we're committed to reviewing, to working with parents and teachers, and we'll take away his suggestion. And I invite him and others across the House to work with us on this important reform, because I think this issue has been raised more than any other with me at Prime Minister's question. It's clearly a broken system. It needs reform, and if we can work together across the House to get it right, I think that is the least we owe to parents and children across the country. Thank you.
Blocker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I commend the Prime Minister for his work in tackling arbitrary detention of British citizens abroad and warmly welcome the creation of a special envoy. The Prime Minister will know of the anguish of the families of Jimmy Lai, Ryan Cornelius, Abdel Fattah, Jagtar Singh Johal and others. So can he tell us when he anticipates the appointment of the envoy, and will they have real powers like their counterparts in Canada and the United States to help bring our people home?
Prime Minister.
Well, can I start by thanking him for his work on the APBG, championing the plight of British nationals facing the most difficult circumstances overseas. We do routinely raise these cases with international counterparts, as he would expect, and we're deeply committed to getting them home and united with their loved ones. As part of strengthening support for British nationals overseas, we are working at pace to get the envoy role set up, and I'll make sure that he's kept updated in relation to that.
Blake Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Government plans for English devolution and NHS reform suggest that integrated care boards should align with new strategic authorities. The government's plan for Bedfordshire won't currently achieve this. So what assurances can the Prime Minister provide that local NHS reorganisation will be good value for money, improve local accountability and deliver the healthcare services needed to serve my constituents in rural mid-Bedfordshire, including the much-needed GP surgery in Wixhams?
Prime Minister.
The points you make about good value for money and accountability are really important. They're embedded in the work we're doing with the NHS at the moment, which is improving under our watch, not only the waiting lists, but in other respects. The 10-year plan for the NHS, which is intended to ensure that the NHS is fit for the future, has a number of principles, including principles of local accountability.
Brandish.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. On the 11th of June, Alexander Dennis announced that it was planning to stop bus manufacturing in Scotland. My honourable friend from Falkirk and I have both met with the workers, the trade unions, the company and both UK and Scottish Government ministers to see how closure can be averted. Alexander Dennis needs commitment of orders for 2025 and 2026, and elected mayors are ideally placed to do this. Our industrial strategy is right when it says where things are made and by whom matters. So, can the Prime Minister assure Alexander Dennis and the workers that he believes bus manufacturing should have a future in Larbert and Falkirk?
Prime Minister.
I'm grateful to him for raising this, and I'm deeply concerned. It is a deeply concerning time for the workers and their families in Falkirk. I do agree, and we are working with mayors and local leaders to develop a pipeline of future orders for zero-emissions buses, and that's an important aspect here. And the Minister of Local Transport is hosting an urgent meeting of the bus manufacturing expert panel. Mr. Speaker, while Labour mayors in England are ordering Scottish buses, the SNP are ordering buses from China. Just like they ordered ships from Turkey and Poland, not Scottish shipyards. The SNP should be backing Scottish workers.
Graham Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could I begin by warmly congratulating the Prime Minister on his first year in office, acknowledge that the Labour manifesto was beautifully written, deeply moving, and like that other great blockbuster of hope and redemption, The Salt Path, a total pack of lies. With joblessness, inflation and debt ballooning, his personal ratings collapsing, and his backbenchers on a work to rule, could the Prime Minister recommend?
Come on, let's get on with the question.
Could the Prime Minister recommend a summer recess read in order to take all our minds away from the calamitous journey on which he and the Chancellor have embarked?
I think most of their backbenchers are already on their summer recess, looking at the benches opposite, Mr. Speaker. We are very proud of our manifesto. It was a very successful manifesto, giving a landslide victory, and now we're very proud to be implementing it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And let us be clear in this House. Israel is starving Palestinian children. That is a war crime. Israel is killing Palestinian children as they queue for food. That is a war crime. Our government quite rightly imposes thousands of sanctions on Russia for its war crimes in Ukraine. How many more horrors must we witness before the Prime Minister acts with the same scale of sanctions against Israel to stop this genocide? Don't Palestinian lives matter?
Hear, hear, hear. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as I said earlier, I'm appalled by reports of more civilians being killed in Gaza, particularly when they are trying to access aid. And each of those incidents does need to be fully and transparently investigated, with accountability for any failing. That, of course, has to be alongside the ceasefire that is desperately needed, and we're working hard with others to achieve, to release all of the hostages that remain, but also to protect civilians and get much more aid at speed and volume into Gaza.
Lincoln John.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I can see why you call these sessions Prime Minister's questions and not Prime Minister's answers.
If it carries on, there will be no more. Come on, Lincoln John.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Following the magnificent success of the England cricket team earlier on this week, and the triumphal return of Mr. Jofra Archer, would the Prime Minister agree that what he needs to get from his ministers over the next 12 months is more pace and less spin?
Prime Minister.
My ministers have delivered on the NHS, on the economy, on rail, etc. He needs a break.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Successive Conservative governments failed to invest in the North East transport infrastructure. Whilst the Labour government is already changing that with the £1.8 billion recently secured for the region, upgrading Moor Farm and Seaton Burn roundabouts can build on that, unlocking growth, and it's supported by local people and businesses. Does the Prime Minister share my disappointment that rather than support my campaign for upgrades, the Conservative leadership in Northumberland County Council are actively undermining my lobbying efforts to deliver this game changer for the North East?
Prime Minister.
She's doing a superb job for Northumberland, and I'm happy to set out what we've delivered. Over £400 million of funding for Northumberland County Council this year. That's a 5.8% increase this year, Mr Speaker, an 80% increase in the number of homes starting construction in her area, a near £30 million increase in funding for Northumbria Police, and 14 free breakfast clubs in Northumberland, supporting over 3,000 children. That's the difference a Labour government makes.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. During my meetings with guests on the Homes for Ukraine scheme in my Newton Abbot constituency, they are telling me that they are worried about their visas running out, even with the 18-month extension. They see reports of Ukrainians being refused asylum in the UK since it's said to be safe to return to Ukraine, even while Putin's missiles explode in Ukraine cities in record numbers. Some of their children are working through 2- or 3-year education courses and are frightened of having to leave. Will the Prime Minister meet with them and myself to hear their plight and offer them some hope in this uncertain and dangerous world?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank him for raising this, and we're proud to have offered or extended sanctuary to over 300,000 Ukrainians and their families throughout the visa scheme since the invasion in 2022. We do need to provide certainty and security for Ukrainians in the United Kingdom, and we will provide an additional 18 months permission to remain in the UK and continued rights to live, work and study here as well.
James Frith.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In 2017, I led a select committee inquiry that warned of an emerging disaster in SEND. Those warnings went unheeded by the Conservatives, who left behind a broken system, which even they have admitted since is lose, lose, lose. Can the Prime Minister confirm that this Labour government's rebuilt SEND system will be shaped by listening to the needs of SEN families, never again ignored but served in the best traditions of a Labour government?
Prime Minister.
Well, he's right, and I think there's general agreement across the House that the system is broken, just like almost everything they touched, which was broken at the end of 14 miserable years. It doesn't work for parents and it lets down children, and we will reform it. We're already investing an additional £1 billion, but we do need a system that truly supports every child. We're developing proposals, and I want to work across the House in order to get the right outcome.
Final question, Pepe.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Yet again, we're suffering record-breaking heat waves and drought, which are worrying people in my constituency of South Cambridgeshire, which are both the fastest-growing and the most water-stressed area in the country. The proposed Fens Reservoir is important, but will only provide water for the already ambitious house-building plans, not the thousands of new homes that the government proposes. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that the water crisis in Greater Cambridge is a deal-breaker for the government's growth plans, and will he help me urgently convene a ministerial roundtable with the Cambridge Water Scarcity Group?
She's right to draw attention to the drought and the question more generally of reservoirs. It is shocking that a new reservoir hasn't been built for a very, very long time, not at all in the previous 14 years. We are rebuilding now, and we're doing that alongside the infrastructure and housing that we also need to build, and we'll work across the House on that.
We'll let the front benches change over. Right, we now come to the urgent question. Sir Andrew Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I ask the Minister if she will make a statement on Britain's response to the worsening situation in Sudan?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sudan is the worst humanitarian crisis on record. Over 30 million people need aid and 12 million people have been displaced. Famine is spreading fast and new reports confirm that the situation will deteriorate in the next 3 months. Cholera is also now widespread. Life-saving assistance continues to be blocked by the parties. Last month, an appalling attack on a UN convoy delivering life-saving aid to those fleeing violence in El Fasher killed 5 aid workers. The deliberate targeting of aid workers clearly violates international law, and as the United Nations Security Council penholder on Sudan, the UK led calls for accountability for such attacks, including through the UK-penned press statement on the 12th of June. Last week, the Security Council, the International Criminal Court of the Prosecutor, found reasonable grounds to believe that war crimes and crimes against humanity may well have been committed and continue to be committed in Darfur. The perpetrators must be held to account. The UK continues to play a leading role in ensuring that aid gets to where it's most needed. In April, the Foreign Secretary brought together a broad coalition of partners to build consensus on strengthening humanitarian access. The co-chair's statement calling on the parties to facilitate humanitarian access in accordance with their commitments in the Jeddah Declaration. Over £810 million in funding for Sudan was announced, including £120 million of UK aid, supporting over 650,000 people this year. In the absence of a ceasefire, Mr. Speaker, the humanitarian situation will only worsen. We continue to call on the warring partners to place the interests of the Sudanese people over their pursuit of a military victory. The UK is working with our international partners to push the warring partners to return to the negotiating table and commit to a meaningful, sustainable ceasefire. Any process which follows must be inclusive. We underline the importance of a return to a civilian rule that's democratically elected and representative of the whole country. Moves by the Sudanese armed forces and the rapid support forces to establish their own parallel governments will only exacerbate de facto splits and could lead to permanent partition of Sudan, and this is in no one's interests. Mr. Speaker, we have and we will continue to use all diplomatic tools at our disposal to protect civilians, get aid to those who need it most, and support a Sudanese-led peace process with civilians at its heart.
Sir Andrew.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for granting this urgent question today. I make no apologies for raising the dire and desperate straits of the Sudanese people again in this House, not least because it is Britain which leads on the Sudanese situation in the United Nations on behalf of all other nations. The people of Sudan are in the throes, as the Minister said, of the worst humanitarian catastrophe in the world, and the situation is worsening, even if such things can hardly be imagined. Earlier this month, Mr. Speaker, the United Nations and international organisations reported mass displacement of tens of thousands of people following the combatant forces advancing across Kordofan states. There have been months of increased mobilisation of fighters, including the recruitment of children from across Darfur. As fighting expands, the Kordofan states are the next deadly front. In the recent and welcome ministerial conference hosted by the Foreign Secretary, much needed money was raised, but the goal of a high-level contact group to drive political efforts toward achieving a ceasefire and protecting Sudanese civilians met with an impasse. Mr. Speaker, we must accept that despite our efforts, the past 2 years have been a story of faltering international endeavour, where world events have cast Sudan into the shadows as its people have faced only deepening peril. So I ask the Minister 3 questions. First, what lessons has the government learned from the siege of El Fasher and the overwhelming of the camp for displaced people at Zamzam to prepare for and protect civilians from the spread of violence across the Kordofan states? How is the government supporting the local emergency response rooms? Secondly, can she confirm that the prevention of atrocities remains a key pillar of British policy and is unaffected by the recent cuts in the development budget? And thirdly and finally, what is the government doing to advance international efforts to protect civilians alongside its pursuit of a ceasefire? Are we to assume the Jeddah process is dead? What discussions has she had with her counterparts in the United States over recent weeks?
Minister.
I thank the member for Sutton Coldfield for his questions and also for his long-standing interest not just in Africa in general, but particularly this awful conflict in Sudan. And of course, Sudan is also a personal priority for the Foreign Secretary, which is why he brought together foreign ministers to try to find a resolution. The Prime Minister has reiterated that the UK will continue to play a key humanitarian role, evidenced by the 120 million of UK aid announced for Sudan this year. And on the question that he asks in relation to the work post-Jeddah, we are working to sustain the momentum of the actions agreed at the conference. We continue to work with multilateral institutions, including the African Union, to ensure that strong African leadership is there in response to the conflict. We've also joined the EU-convened consultative group on Sudan in June, and we've initiated a Friends of Sudan grouping in Geneva to advance our work on the protection of civilians, because he's quite right to say that international law in this regard places a heavy emphasis on prevention of conflict, prevention of atrocities. We continue to identify opportunities to use our role as penholder on the Sudan in the UN Security Council and to galvanise UN Security Council action on the conflict in Sudan. He also specifically asked about the situation in the El Fasher camps, and I want to reassure him that the UK is doing all it can, but the question always is access. We have the money, we have the workers, it's access that we need in order to provide that life-saving aid, and that is the nub of the issue which we're working on.
Abdussalam Mohammed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There isn't a single person in my Sudanese diaspora community in Sheffield who haven't been affected by the horrific violence in Sudan. But the most harrowing part for them isn't the regular communication jams, blocking parent from child and brother from sister, or the multiple displacements of millions of the most vulnerable people, or indeed the famine ripping through the population. The worst part is, whilst this, the worst humanitarian crisis in the world, is breaking every boundary we know, world powers continue to look away. The UK government has a unique position as penholder for Sudan, and at the UN Security Council, I appreciate that we called for a ceasefire through the resolution. But the resolution set no deadline for concluding the ceasefire, and it authorised no enforcement mission. So, Minister, my question is, what are we doing to enforce accountability for the shameful complicity of states backing the warring sides, and when will we push for an agreement of a ceasefire so that the people of Sudan can be free from this horror?
Could I thank the Honourable Lady from Sheffield and the loud voice that she has in here on behalf of her Sudanese diaspora. The most important thing that the UK can do to build on the momentum from the London Sudan conference, bearing in mind that we were the first to really have such a conference, is to continue to base our work on the statement from the co-chairs of that important conference, to continue to, as she says, use our role at the United Nations and to work through the new Friends of Sudan grouping in order to keep pushing at the highest level, as she says, using our position on the UN Security Council to galvanise the Security Council action and continue the important supply of aid into the region.
Shadow Minister Wendy Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for granting this urgent question today. I'm also grateful to my right honourable friend, the member for Sutton Coldfield, for pursuing this too. Because, of course, the situation in Sudan is dire. We are deeply concerned at the International Criminal Court's findings last week that there are reasonable grounds to believe that war crimes and crimes against humanity may be being committed in Darfur. The humanitarian situation also continues to deteriorate, with the UN warning on 30th of June of drastic cuts to life-saving food aid for Sudanese refugees fleeing to neighbouring countries. Sudan has also been identified as a global hunger hotspot of highest concern, and without immediate humanitarian assistance, the risk is terrible. With recent attacks on UN aid convoys, can the Minister provide her latest assessment of the situation and the extent of aid blocking? How is she ensuring UK aid, including the £120 million announced at the April Sudan conference, will reach those who need it and that aid workers are protected? More broadly, what new measures is the government taking to compel the warring parties into a ceasefire, to allow more aid in and facilitate deconfliction for delivery in the meantime? And how has she supported Sudanese civilian and political forces to engage in constructive dialogue processes such as the Cairo conference? And what is her assessment about the effectiveness of these processes? Despite the spending review, we are still yet to understand what 0.3% means for bilateral aid. So will she confirm the bilateral spend figures for Sudan this year? Because, of course, Sudan matters. It's not in the UK's national interest for the crossing of red lines in this conflict to persist, nor to have the displacement of people on this scale, nor to see the further destabilisation of this region of Africa. Thank you.
Minister.
I thank the honourable